like to now, having done those things, I'd like to introduce you to, I was going to say those things over here, I don't mean that. These people over here, our panel for the evening. In no particular order, I'll start over with Steve. Steve is from philosophy. He's written extensively in the philosophy of mind. That is why he's here this evening. Michael Gratzke is an expert on various things, including love. It's a Valentine's Day theme. We're continuing that one. But it's also, I should introduce him more formally, he's the Associate Dean for Research in whatever the new faculty is now called, because I never remember, but also Professor of German and Comparative Literature. Mike Brayshaw, sorry, you're next on my list for some reason. He's your artificial intelligence sort of guy. That's why he's here. So, and together with Mary Ellen Large sitting right next to him, who's done a lot of work, on my notes it says cognitive neuroscience, but I think it means neuroscience. Neuroscience would be, why do people fiddle while Rome burns? I suppose it's a question. So we have a philosopher, so an expert on love, who is in charge of research, so he'll explain how that all works. And we have two people who are experts within the realm of artificial intelligence and neuroscience. And Simon is going to chair, and I'm going to disappear. I'm sure it'll be fascinating. Thank you.
Well, James is too British, I think, to thank himself as well, but James has been crucial to this event too, so thank you, James. So we're here tonight to talk about Rise of the Machines, artificial intelligence, and the last few days we've been watching lots of films. Ex Machina, film about a cyborg, 2001: A Space Odyssey, one of the most famous examples of artificial intelligence in the movies. And the film tonight, although we can't give away too much of the plot, is about artificial intelligence as well. So let me go in with the elephant in the room. How close are we to these things actually happening? How close are we to science fiction becoming science fact?
Well, it depends how you define science fiction. If we go back and think about the original Star Trek series, Captain Kirk and all that, and look at the technology they had, which was supposed to be centuries and centuries away, with the exception of the matter transference beam and the warp drive, we could basically do that. Let's take their communicators they had. Well, their communicators is completely old-fashioned compared with something like a smartphone or an iPhone. So it depends how far in the future you look, and it depends on what type of AI you want. There's an awful lot of AI on your smartphones. There's an awful lot of AI on your cars. What do you think things like ABS is? Yep. In the old days, say in the Mini, where you got a steering wheel which went down to a rack and pinion that actually moved the wheels. Whereas now, if you look at the dashboard, it's almost like being in charge of a game. It's an input device. And how much there is between you and the actual physical engine, you've got a whole AI in a traction control system. So it depends where you want to say AI. To some extent, AI is actually in this room now, in all our smartphones. Hello, Siri.
But I suppose we're more interested in killer robots and things that actually think like humans, not stuff like ABS and stuff like that. I think that's what our popular conception of AI is, machines that seem human. Is that something that's close?
I think it's getting closer. There's still a way to go. AI has speeded up. So a lot of AI in the 70s, 80s and 90s, there were certain limitations. If you look what's happened in the last 10 years, things like deep learning, some stuff that's happening in semantic technology and things like that, the speed at which it's changing, and even the speed at which it's changing on a 6-monthly basis. Look at what Facebook have been doing, look what Google been doing with Go. Go as a game was intractable. It's intractable because to search it, as a classical machine would do, it's just absolutely massive search space, and machines couldn't do that. Yet we've now got a Go program that can beat the best in the world. And we've been trying to do that since, last 56 years. So that's the type of breakthroughs we're seeing. And they're the type of things that have happened, in the last year?
So you think we're on the cusp?
It's a dangerous thing to say, and it depends how you define it. I think we're in a very exciting time.
What about our other panellists? Does anyone have any views on this, whether artificial intelligence is about to happen?
I'll chip in if that's okay. I mean, I think I'm going to be slightly more sceptical and make a distinction. We're talking about artificial intelligence, but actually, as your second follow-up question indicated, actually what people are interested about is artificial mindedness or artificial consciousness or something like that. And which I take it what they're interested in is whether some artificial human-made system could achieve some sort of subjectivity or something like this.
But you're also assuming human. Maybe the first first alien that we meet is not something that lands from Mars, but something we cook up in an AI lab.
Yeah, that's right. When you say what do you mean I'm assuming human?
Well, you said human-like.
Human-like. Oh yeah. Well, I make no apologies for that, but I could get into a discussion about that. At the end of the day, these concepts are our concepts, right? The only things that we know are super intelligent are ours. Our concepts are shaped around human life. Whether we recognise something completely alien as intelligent or conscious, that's an interesting question. I would suggest we wouldn't. I mean, if it was so alien, we wouldn't know what to make of it. We wouldn't see it as an intelligence, right? Because our concepts are shaped around human life. So I think we're probably still quite a long way from that, from the sorts of things you see in Ex Machina and the other sorts of films. So we will get intelligence increasing and machines able to do lots of different things. But whether they will achieve consciousness, of course, we can't say. We don't quite know how that is in us, right? So we certainly don't know how it will come about in a machine.
Mary Ellen, you're an expert on the brain.
I'm nodding as well. Yes, I agree with Stephen. When I think of what we understand about human consciousness, we're just on the edge. We can make. I went to a really interesting talk with Adrian Owen. He's in Canada right now, and he wants to understand how to communicate to people who are in a coma, who can't communicate, who can't behave in a way that we can understand. And one of the things that he does is he puts them into a scanner, and he speaks to them, and then sees whether parts of the brain that are involved in interpreting language are activated. And he was able to use that. So there's a sense that you can have. So we can get a handle on consciousness, but it's in a very crude level. So it is an area in the brain activated, but we don't know how to communicate with someone in that state. We can just say that they have some awareness of speech around us. And then I suppose when I think of sentience, I kind of think of my cat, right? So I think of one of the things that we do, and I think we do it without even thinking about it, is we anthropomorphize. So my cat I treat like a little human, but my cat is not a human, and if it is, it's a really dumb human, So it's like if it's raining out the back, it assumes that it's not raining out the front. I mean, this is, it's like, and I think that, in terms of the kinds of things that, my sense is the kinds of things that we can do with artificial intelligence right now and into the foreseeable future are around narrow concepts of intelligence. I mean, right now we can't even agree in psychology and in neuroscience a definition for consciousness and a definition for intelligence. We're still arguing about that. We can say, if you're going to go to school, we can measure aspects of intelligence, but those aspects are really related to schooling and not to, the way that you grow up and the way that you understand the world. It's not, it's a sort of a cognitive, dominated idea of intelligence. It's not about, intelligence is a lot about being adaptive and flexible and responding in real time to what's happening around you.
One of the kind of earliest, and I still think it's applied, the tests for determining whether a machine is truly intelligent is known as the Turing test. Can one of you explain what the Turing test is, and is that still the test of whether a machine has become truly intelligent?
Well, it's an imitation game.
Yeah.
It's can some entity pass itself off as a human being, and there's an annual prize called the Loebner competition, and people write these chatbots, and a jury has to come along, and they have to do the Turing test, and they have to talk to the bot, and have to vote whether they think it's a person or whether it's a bot. And when the bot is able to pass this imitation test and they think it's a person, it's passed the Turing test.
So they've already done this.
Oh, it's a Loebner Prize, and I think either this year or next year it's at Bletchley Park.
Right.
And it's been going for many, many years now. And if you go up on the web, you'll be able to see the actual bots themselves that are in the competition each year, and you'll be able to see the transcripts of the conversation, so you can judge yourself how real these things are. And indeed, again, not to get any spoilers, one of the bots that won it twice in the noughties was Alice. And Alice was what they saw by what the screenwriters saw who wrote the film you're going to see this afternoon.
Right.
So actually it was not an artificial intelligence, it was actually a chatbot. And a chatbot is basically something that's trying to fake it.
But these machines have already passed the Turing test, is that what you're saying?
In some cases, some juries have thought that they have.
Yeah.
Most of the technology that these things are using are not using natural language processing. A lot of the bots which you come about on the web, these things known as chatbots, are actually trying to just spot surface features of languages. So, for example, the last couple of weeks I've had my second years writing one of these bots. And so it basically will spot keywords. So if you measure your mother, father, sister or brother, it will say, tell me more about your family. And you can elaborate this and give it lots and lots and lots of more of these rules, and it will be able to have an increasingly more flexible conversation with you. And at the end, it has some reasons. If it gets stuck, it has these things like, go on, that's most interesting. Oh yes, could you tell me more? Which means I haven't understood a word you said, but I'm trying to hang this conversation. I'm trying to fake it.
Yeah.
And they're not AI, but those are typically the chatbots that we often see around.
So machines can fake humanness, but they can't
Well,
be human.
there's a whole different branch of computational linguistics. And the computational linguistics is where people actually try and use AI to try and understand it. And indeed, that's
Sorry, I was going to say, I wouldn't say that the machines can fake it, because that sort of assumes that they're intentional, conscious creatures that are deliberately setting out to deceive us.
Yeah.
I mean, that was part of the problem with Ex Machina, in a sense that, you know, the test was to see if it was the responses were genuine or not. And if you thought, well, even if they weren't, that, you know, it's pretty amazing that you've created this machine that can sort of deceive you into thinking that they're behaving in a certain way. I mean, the question for the Turing test, I suppose, is what's it a test of? And the trouble, going back to our earlier conversation, is it's sort of too narrow in its focus. It sort of asks the machine to sort of replicate human linguistic responses, as if, you know, we would suddenly attribute intelligence and consciousness on the basis of its ability to provide linguistic responses, which in fact we don't do. Because even if some machines have passed the test, no one's jumping in the streets and dancing at the breakthrough, because it's too narrow as a test anyway. But it does raise an interesting question about what do we base these sorts of psychological attributes upon? You know, what other features of something or a machine or animal are we referring to when we make these attributions? I just think it's too narrow. It's only picking one. In fact, we base them on all sorts of things.
Well, along with language, another thing that
Yeah.
people often say determines being human is emotion. And Michael, it's Valentine's Day. You're an expert in love. Last night we saw a film, and one of the respondents said that one of the things that machines can't do is love, and that's what distinguishes machines from humans. That it's the fact that we can love. That's what makes us human. What do you make of that?
It's a nice definition and pleases us because it makes us special. But it's very difficult, obviously, to define love. If we start on Valentine's Day with romantic love, that's a very, very narrow concept within a whole range of possible ways of looking at love. And what we do know about romantic love is that in a certain sense it is very blind. Love is blind in the sense that it is good enough for me to have a love response is what usually happens. We have this idea that in a romantic relationship we should mutually recognize each other in the fullness of our being, which is not what actually happens. We fall in love with a very narrow set of characteristics of a person, or the emotions we feel when we meet them. And then there's a period when this initial infatuation then is transformed to some kind of relationship, and we learn to love in a different way. But the idea that we somehow magically understand each other fully in our humanness or in our personhood, that is not how love or romantic love usually works. So the question is really, when we look at films like Ex Machina or Her, is reciprocity important to that? And the answer is no. We do know that we love our pets. Our cats don't care about us. We acknowledge that, we love them nevertheless. Our dogs have been bred in a way that they display behavior which is for us good enough as love. So they hold eye contact, they yawn when we yawn, they seek our physical proximity. These are all things we want in a lover, so we get them in a dog. But we can't ask the dog. We can't ask the dog, do you love me? And they can't signal us in any way that they actually love us. There is no, so we are very good at projecting emotion onto maybe sentient beings, but also on objects all the time. And people have relationships with their technical devices. We talk to our computers even if they are dumb and can't talk back. And we are quite happy for a Siri type app to engage with us. It comes naturally to us. But obviously behind that is just some programming. And quite often the answer, sorry, I didn't get that. Can you rephrase? Or why don't you look it up on the internet yourself, you lazy git? Which I get out of my phone all the time. So we please ourselves with the thought that we are unique because we love, but our love can be easily fooled.
So in that sense, you wouldn't consider, I think, I'm not ruining the plot of the film, I hope to say that there's an element of someone falling in love with a machine. You wouldn't consider that true love. You need the reciprocity.
No, I absolutely think that is what our experience of love is. Sorry if I was unclear about that. The ideal of complete mutual understanding is an ideal, and no love probably will ever reach that point. So being some love object being good enough in faking or imitating or simulating love is all we actually need to love. Now the real question is, what happens when AIs become conscious and actually have a choice whether they love us back or not? And that is something you have in Ex Machina as a film, and maybe in other films you may watch at some stage as well.
Mariana, we're talking about all these characteristics that define being human and trying to compare whether machines can do this. Is that the problem, though? The problem is that we shouldn't try and make machines human, that machines can do creative and interesting and wonderful things in ways that humans can't, and maybe we should stop thinking about this idea that artificial intelligence needs to replicate human thinking. Is there different kinds of thinking that can equally be creative?
That's a difficult question to ask. I think that in terms of culturally, I like reading a lot of science fiction, so that's probably one of the reasons why I'm here as well. And you know, when I think of AI, I mean, I love the stories that have sort of ships that have got minds, and the ships can be really grumpy, and sometimes they just they leave. Like I'm thinking of Ian Banks' Culture series, and I like the drones, and they're always, you know, a little bit sort of, you know, they get like sort of a bit agitated and they'll shout at you and stuff. So I like the idea of having an artificial intelligence as human. I also, from a research perspective, find it's very useful when we're trying to understand how the human brain works, to have computational models of those theories about how the brain works. And some of that work then feeds into the development of AI. I'm not too sure whether, because we're so far from understanding human consciousness and the relationship between consciousness and brain mechanisms, I think maybe sort of in a from a sort of very sort of extreme philosophical standpoint, you could say, right, okay, it's a brain, it's a biological machine, and out of that biological machine comes human consciousness. So if we can replicate the human brain, then we'll be able to create an artificial human consciousness. Perhaps we can, but I think we're so far away from that, it's become sort of fantasy right now.
Can I come in there and talk a little bit about science fiction as well, or about utopian and dystopian genres? Because what is really their task? Why do we use them? And there's only a small section of that which is actually about looking into the future we can't see. Mainly what these genres do is they help us understand our present or near past. So when we have a series like this, the digital dystopias, the dystopias aren't really, I would argue, about what's going to happen in 5, 10 or 15 years. They're about the anxieties we have now, right now. They tell us something about our relationship with technology and our relationship with each other, which is, I think, a very strong feature in these various films. They talk about human relationships and our fear that they are fragile and may be replaced by relationships between humans and machines.
Okay. I mean, continuing on the theme of utopian thinking is something that exists in Silicon Valley a lot. And every 10 years we have similar cycles of people saying AI is going to happen, we're on the edge of a technology. I mean, this has been going on since the 1950s. People have been saying we're just on the verge of AI, and today people like Elon Musk, who we saw in the film yesterday, continue that tradition. Are we just being over-optimistic here? Is this just another 1950s where we're all over the news, we're on the cusp of AI, but this is just something we keep doing again and again? I mean, you've been researching it for a while, Mike. What's your sense?
Yes, the classic, it started in 1956. By 1958, they could do checkers, that's drafts.
Yep.
And so they thought by 1970 they had chess solved. And of course, Deep Blue didn't come along until early 1990s, something like that, when Kasparov got the bean. Clearly, advances are being made. Look at what we can do in limited domains, but the best chess player and the best Go player and things like that on the planet now are AI. So clearly, we've come a long way. I think I would like to just pick up something about modelling, though. There's really two types of AIs out there. One of which is going to try and copy humans. And so we were interested in problem solving. We're interested in memory. Or we're interested in if we can find a nice blueprint theory about how we do something, then we can make a computational model of that. And that is one way of proceeding. And as I say, it's a two-way thing. The two can learn off each other. Yeah. But there's this other thing that sometimes computers are really good at doing things, like crunch. So you can get on a really big computer and you can get to crunch patterns out. And that's something which we can't do, but a computer can do. And so some problems where we say want to do data mining, and we want to find out interesting things like what do you use your Tesco card for? Then we can use these aspects of computers, which computers are really good at. And therefore it comes back to the thing is, we really don't know how alien or how like us something we actually produce is going to be. It might well be that the solution we find is an engineering solution, not a psychology solution. And if it's an engineering solution, it could be quite weird. I mean, none of us in this room know what it will be. If it is a case that really we are actually fairly unique in the design space, and to actually design something, it's got to have quite a lot of properties like us, then indeed what we end up with probably is going to be recognisable as some humanoid. And picking up on the other point you made, I think when ET arrives, we'll have a lot of problems working out whether it's intelligent or not. Just think about the comparative ethology we're having now with bottlenose dolphins and bonobo chimps. They can clearly compute eye. So, classic example of bonobo chip. And what you do is you put a little sticker onto its eyebrow. You then give it a mirror, and it immediately goes like that and pulls the sticker off. So it can clearly compute I, reflection of me, and that shouldn't be there. Well, that's some type of consciousness at some level. And really, we know that mirrors and we know that films work with bottlenose dolphins and with the higher chimps. Therefore, perhaps we're already living in a world where there's different intelligences. And what we've got to do,
It's not clear they're different.
it may be coming back to a Nagel argument. Maybe we may not know the appropriate level to describe a chimp being a chimp in a chimp society. And I forgot what I was going to say, so I'll stop.
Sorry.
I've got to get this in because I'm fascinated by this, but then I want to bring the audience in.
Okay.
But one of the things that terrifies people about AI, I think, is that we're all going to be out of a job soon, that machines are going to, and that's already happening. A lot of the fears about immigration in the US, for example, actually much more people have been put out of jobs by machines than they have by immigration.
This factory in Japan,
Yeah.
was it last week, they replaced the workforce with robots?
Right. Well, yeah. And again, this has been going on since the 1950s. But how far do you see this going? Do you see all kinds of jobs, service level jobs, professional jobs being replaced, doctors, teachers being replaced by artificial beings, and how far away is that, if that's likely
Well,
to
it depends
happen?
what type of intelligence you want. If the job was not very intelligent in the first place, then having a fairly dumb AI to do it. You know, what happened in the city, and a lot of times, these clerks were told, if such and such happens to a stock, then do rule X. If such and such happens to a stock, do rule Y. And their job was essentially implementing this thing, which is just effectively a lookup table. And so a lot of the early what were known as expert systems in the early 1980s were just those types of things. So what the person was doing was not that intelligence. And yeah, the AI was good enough to do that. If you're talking about the Kurzweil singularity, the singularity, if you like, that's human intelligence. And if that's AI, the singularity is this point where supposedly one takes over the other. And you've had various people go into the press recently saying this is going to be a very frightening event. I think that's a very long way away. Because what we can do is we can do medium. If we could do small size engineering in the 80s, we can now do medium and quite large scale engineering, but we can't do the big thing.
So we're quite far off, kind of most jobs being replaced.
No, because a lot of jobs are not hard jobs.
Yeah.
A lot of jobs are, fairly simple rules and fairly simple constrained. And if they're those types of jobs, replacing a Steve of the world to talk about philosophy, we're a long way off that. But actually, to have an intelligent Hoover that can go around and knows how to open doors and can hoover an auditorium and stuff like that. Yeah, why not? Probably can do.
The trouble with robots as well, we have to remember, is they don't buy things. Right? So there's sort of if there's the sort of these economic consequences apart from anything. I mean, that's not to say you couldn't have this, but then we'd have to think seriously about how we organise society.
Don't you use a buy a bot on eBay?
No, actually, I have a question for Mike, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I hadn't read about this. I heard about it on the radio, and they were talking about AI. And one of the researchers was saying that they can do amazing things. There's all kinds of wonderful things that are going on out there. But one of the difficulties they've had is actually getting a robot to fold a towel. Is that the case? Yeah, because so it's this. So, and there was another guy talking a couple of days ago on Radio 4, saying that we're sort of getting to the stage now where there's AI that could take over jobs that lawyers do and doctors do. In fact, he was saying already that there's AI doing
differential
diagnosis. He said, but there was an area where robots, where AI doesn't work very well, is sort of in more kind of skilled trades. And that really we should be pushing our children towards skilled trades rather than the kind of lawyer, doctor jobs, which is interesting. It's kind of interesting. And it makes you feel interesting because you think about, if you guys just trying to pretend to fold a towel, think how easy that is, right? It's dead easy. I mean, you don't even think about it. It's just, it's a towel, fold it down, put it away. A robot can't do that. So there's weird spaces where you can't, it all falls apart, where for us it's trivial.
And then there are things like translation. Many people now see Google translating things or Facebook translating things, and it's getting better. There will be a time when everyday communication and technical communication can be translated quite well. But the reaction to that shouldn't be fear. The reaction is to train translators to use these tools well. That's what we do. So our students in the master's program, Translation Studies, learn how to use Trados and other programs to make their job quicker. But it doesn't actually replace them, because you still need a human mind to judge in the end whether it makes sense or not, all of it.
Okay, so we're not all going to be out of a job just yet. That's good to
You
hear.
will.
Okay, I'd like to bring the audience in, actually, so if we could have the house lights come up and see if we've got any questions. If anyone's listening. Tony? Is he listening? There we are. Okay, I can just about make people out. Have we got any questions from the audience? Yes, over here, yeah.
I was researching into Nicholas Carr, and he stressed that technology exists due to an imbalance between human, physical and mental evolution. So if it were a case where artificial intelligence were to get out of hand, would the human body have to adapt as well?
Well, this brings into the notion of cyborgs. And part of this is potentially we don't know how to do it. There's an issue about getting a big enough bandwidth interface between physiology and cyber technology. So that is science fiction, so let's just wave over that. I went to a talk once when it concluded that Queen Mother, who was still alive at the time, actually was a cyborg. Because she'd had various things replaced. And then you get into the Theseus' ship about, how much do you need to be replaced to be a cyborg, and how much do you need to have your body adapted, at what point do you swap over. So it's still very much science fiction, that, but it's something obviously that we may have to come to live with, as people want, intelligent hip replacements and things like that.
Any other questions from the audience? Yes, down here.
I was interested in what you were saying about love and sort of, I guess, superficial nature of what we see as romantic love. Would you say then that there is a clear distinction that can never be overcome by AI, that actually love in relationships requires sacrifice, and it's certainly in order for sustainable relationships, that's not something that robots or AI will ever be able to overcome?
That's an interesting definition of love, that it needs sacrifice. It's a very common one. It's a 19th century one, and it usually involves the death of women, because it's the kind of Anna Karenina, Effie Briest, and Madame Bovary type of thing, where you have consumer capitalism running and romantic ideals, and all of that crashes in the life of a woman, and in the end, the only way out for the book is to kill her off. So my hope would be that we move towards a society where we have to kill fewer people and fewer women to make love work, and have less sacrifice.
I guess I meant more sacrifice on the part of sort of giving time and that sort of thing, not necessarily sort of physical death.
The thing is, are we talking about love as in I love you, or love as in we have a mutual love relationship? The love as in I love you, I'm bringing my love to you, can hit any kind of person or object. And I can be resourceful in that for years. Now, it's probably at some stage called stalking or mental illness, but it does happen all the time. The question is the mutual relationship. What makes a mutual love relationship, as imperfect as it will always be from our side, the human side, work? And what makes it work is is choice on both sides. I choose to be with you and to stay with you, and you choose to be with me. And that's the point where the artificial intelligence faking it is different from an artificial consciousness actually making the choice to spend time with me.
I have a question.
It's
Sorry.
Valentine's Day anyway.
I was just thinking what you were saying about choice. Is there any literature around love between slave and slave owners?
Yes, there is, and of course it's very tricky, and it falls into this area where power relationships are being analyzed, and obviously there are power relationships in all human relationships, and how they're negotiated, and when it comes then into something such an extreme, which is ownership in a legal sense, that of course makes things very, very complicated. But we do know historically that these relationships did take place, and they still take place because there's modern slavery, obviously. From our point of view, sitting here nicely in a warm middle-class environment and a temple of learning, it is unethical. But the question of ethics in love is something we haven't really touched upon. It's again very, very complicated. There are lots of people who would argue that all is fair in love and war. So if my enslaving you helps me to win your heart ultimately, it may be the right thing for our love.
Yeah, because I was just wondering, if you think about a robot or an AI not having a choice, then perhaps a corollary of that would be the love between a slave and a slave owner.
Which was the theme of Ex Machina on Friday as well, the film on Friday.
Yeah.
But one of the big areas of AI in terms of agents being able to make choices is providing axiological mechanism, value-based measurements. So the agent's got to want something, and if it has various things it can do, it can choose to, between those based upon a model of beliefs, desires and intentions. So people have been trying to take that part of emotions and actually try and produce those at the heart of choice-based mechanisms in certain types of AI. That was this morning's lecture.
Can I just ask the audience, how many of you are here on a date night?
Oh.
That's a very bold choice. Congratulations.
Do we have any final questions for the panel? Yes, at the back here. Yeah.
We've seen robots used in factories make large workforces unemployed. If AIs are also employed in offices, such as legal offices, for example, a similar thing could happen. So, in your opinions, will the rise of AI create more social injustice by pushing people out of work and making rich corporations developing software, even rich will be powerful? Or will it actually be good for society as well?
Well, it's not something new. I come from not far from London Foot. And of course in the Industrial Revolution, they got all these mills, water-powered mills and machinery. And before it was in the farms, it was all done, all the wool was done by hand. And now the machines were doing the wool, and they came down and they smashed the machines up, and that's where we get the term Luddites from. It's been a continual thing. New technology will come around and it will change society. It's just that this type of technology, the smart technology, it will come around. Smartphones are only 10 years, 3 weeks old. And I don't know about you, I wouldn't want to be without my smartphone. And it's changed my life. I don't wear a watch any longer. You know, I always used to wear a watch. I don't. And about 3 weeks ago, I forgot my phone. I was bereft all day.
I think you've got a point, and I think that perhaps we're a little bit complacent about that the relationship between. So I'm not too sure. I think we've all been born in a capitalist society, so we tend to think that capitalism, that's it. You know, till the end of time, capitalism is a system that we're going to be living with. And in a capitalist system, yeah, there is going to be problems if there's no jobs, because capitalism, as Steve points out, depends on consumption. So if all the robots are doing everything and you don't pay for robots, then who's buying it? So I think that if we can start conceiving of a different kind of society, then technology is not a threat. We'd have to, but we will be talking about a different system where capital is not accumulating. And that's kind of over to you, given age.
We've got time for one more question, if there is any. Down here.
So it's sort of a philosophy question as well as a technical question, but maybe something that is uniquely human or uniquely biological is the ability to act on impulse rather than being pre-programmed to behave in a certain way. What your thoughts on that would be?
Which question first?
Impulse.
Let's do them in
can I
order.
ask the impulse one?
Do the impulse one, yeah.
I think it's very dangerous if we invest a lot in some idea that there's something that makes us unique, whatever it is. Because, you know, the more we find out how the world works, the more we've discovered over the past 150 years or so that it's not true, right? And so, for example, I can't see, at the different sorts of artificial intelligence systems, certain sorts, I mean, you talked about programming. Maybe that's one stage of the development of artificial intelligence. That may be true. But I don't see why, in principle, there's nothing obvious in principle why you couldn't have an artificial system that didn't replicate impulse, right? I mean, Mike will talk more about these sorts of things where, you know, we now have artificial intelligence systems that learn, you know, and I think, you know, even though they look like, well, there was a disagreement between us earlier on, I'm in agreement with Mike that I think if there's any sort of breakthrough on this, we'll probably come across it by accident, right? Because we don't quite understand the complexity in our own case of what produces consciousness or experience or mindedness. But whatever it is, if we were able to produce some sort of artificial system that replicated mindedness in some ways, I don't see that there's anything in principle why it wouldn't act in a way that we might call impulse or on intuition. There's nothing distinctive about those things. I mean, after all, look, let me put it crudely. You want examples of intelligent, conscious machines, okay? Well, here we are, right? Unless you think in something that some sort of immaterial soul substance or something that's doing this. Otherwise, look, here we are. Here we sit. And so I don't think there's... I wouldn't invest anything in any notion like that, really. Whether it's love or intuition or impulse or anything like this.
And the second question about
Yeah,
being unable to think for ourselves because of our reliance on technology.
Well, again, we've always relied on paper diaries and so on. I mean, there is a sort of debate in one area of philosophy of mind about whether these things we should consider these part of our memory. The mind involves external things as well as, you know, whatever's going on in here. It's not just limited to what's going on in here. I mean, of course, technology will make us lazy. That's true. I mean, you know, I've almost lost the ability to add up, you know, because I sort of just do it on a machine. I'm sort of exaggerating, but, you know, basic maths and stuff. Why bother, you know, when I can do it? I don't need it to be able to do it. So it will make us lazy, yes, but
it also can enhance us. So you can talk about technology enhanced learning, technology enhanced problem solving, where we can have tools, which we use these tools, and with the aid of these tools we can do things we couldn't do before, or we can do things more easily, or more fun.
Yes.
I'm also skeptical of all doomsayers around technology, because I remember vividly that my mother would tell me that television in the evening in a measured way is fine, but breakfast television melts away your brain. And unless you think it has happened, I'm 49 now, I don't think it will happen anytime soon. Or the Walkman, which destroys society because we all walk around with headphones. It changes the way we behave, but it doesn't. There's no evidence that actually it has destroyed anything, or we're going to be taken over by these things. It changes the way we interact with the machines, but also with each other. But I don't think that we've actually been interacting less with each other. One of the features of our smartphones is that we're constantly in touch with people either we care about or people we find in one way or other interesting, even if it's annoying on Twitter. So it is a great tool for communication, which I like, and I'm carrying mine. Are we all carrying? Yeah. You don't even have a smartphone. Can you explain that as a neuroscientist? Why don't you have a smartphone?
If I have a smartphone, then everyone can get in touch with me 24/7, and I like my alone time. You can turn it off, I suppose, but it's too enticing. I mean, people are on it all the time. I like face to face.
And on the principle of alone time, I think we should leave it there. Would you join me in thanking the panel for their excellent presentation?
Thank you.